Our largest customer churned. So 7% of our revenue churned, and we're 5 days away from final signing.
If you have leverage as a seller, that's important, because if you don't, then you're at the mercy of whatever happens.
Yeah. The boutique faced financial problems and ended up going out of business. So they tried to not pay us by claiming wrongful sizing. Our big problem was that we thought we found our ICP. We were a solution in search of a problem.
Hello, this episode of Misfit Founders is brought to you in partnership with Paddle. Paddle is a payments infrastructure platform for over 4,000 software companies. They manage billing, tax, subscriptions, pricing, retention, and also fraud, so you don't have to. So if you're a SaaS or software founder, check out the link in the description. Might be useful. Now, back to the episode. Thank you for accepting to do this in such a short notice.
I do what I'm told.
It's like, okay, go there, do that. You also have a very, very interesting story, and one a bit different than a lot of the founders that I've interviewed. You're a founder, an entrepreneur. You moved in senior roles. Mm-hmm. We'll discuss whether you still consider yourself a founder, an entrepreneur in a sense or not. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think you have a really interesting journey, and want to start with introductions. Maybe a quick introduction of who you are, mm-hmm. What do you do for Paddle today, the company that I partner up to bring Misfit founders to Dublin to SaaStock. So yeah, quick intro, maybe an elevator pitch of Paddle as well.
Cool. So yes, I'm Andrew Davies. I serve Paddle as CMO, as Chief Marketing Officer, have done for almost 2 years. I entered the world of work straight after university. Well, actually, before university, I was always a conscientious kid who was doing odd jobs and doing paper rounds and doing something. And actually, Deloitte Consulting sponsored me through university. I did a year's worth of work with them before going to university. I was on their scholarship placement in the UK.
Okay.
And that meant that I went to university with one goal, which was to start my own business so I could say no to them at the end and not go to their grad recruitment program.
That feels like an episode from Drive to Survive.
Genuinely, that was my one goal of going to university. And so I did a business degree, but the first term, I met my first co-founder, and we slept 4 hours a night. We committed to sleep 4 hours a night so we could work all of our waking hours on trying to start a business. And this was, years ago, before there were so many platforms to build on. When going down to the local library to read about small, medium businesses was the way about finding out how to start a business. So that was the very early days, and I've been in startups pretty much since, and we can talk about some of that journey if it's interesting. And one of the joys I have at Paddle is serving startups. One of the reasons I joined Paddle was that I find myself as one of the personas we target. I have been a software founder, and we serve thousands of software founders around the globe. So you asked what we do. So we are a billing, payment, subscription management, tax compliance stack for product-led software founders. If you're building a software company and scaling it globally, there's all kinds of regulatory compliance, payments, complexity that comes around. Yeah. And we think about it as these invisible barriers that get in the way of you scaling your business. They're not the things you want to be dealing with. And Paddle solves those for about 5,000 companies globally. And we do that all across the world, helping those companies scale, removing that operational burden. And we also then acquired another business that has brought us a wonderful team of pricing experts, of retention experts, and also a metrics database where we have a free metrics product. But because of people signing up and using that, we get to see the data behind what's almost 36 billion of ARR. So 36 billion of annual revenue that's going through digital product and software companies. We see that information on aggregate and get to learn from it. So, that's a little bit about Paddle. We can dive into anything there you'd like, but...
that's a huge trend analysis, commodity in a sense, Profitwell. And we were using Profitwell at Jigsaw as well, mainly because it was a free tool.
There you go.
And we were a poor startup, but I feel that has a really big place in the SaaS world, basically taking care of the little guy in a sense.
Yep.
So that's That's really awesome. You mentioned that when you were young, you were doing a lot of little things. What did you mean by that? So what are the things that you were doing as a kid that gave this entrepreneurial attitude?
Most of it wasn't even that entrepreneurial. It was just being conscientious to get out and work and try and earn something. So we're talking,
How old were you?
14, 15, 16, 17.
Okay.
So working in an artificial flower making factory, or selling double glazing, or stacking shelves at the local department store. Anything I could do. And I enjoy those roles. It gave me an early angle on work, early visibility to work. But really that role with Deloitte was the first kind of proper time I put on a suit and tie and walked into a London office. And it was a great horizon setter on what went on in the world of work.
Have you ever thought what that conscientious attitude, where did that come from? Was it like a family instilled thing? Was it something that you've seen as a role model and stuff, or you just had this drive inside of you to do stuff, to work, to because I started very young as well, but I had my dad as a role. I always looked at my dad as a role model. He was a businessman. He started very young. He was working in a what's it called, career, like where you drive big trucks with, yeah. And I feel like that was a big, because I started as well. I started doing various jobs when I was 13, 14. But what was it for you?
Yeah, my dad as well. Very diligent, always working for the family, working hard. And he was wonderful with our education as well. Every night he'd sit down and help us with our homework, help us with our assignments. And so I definitely learnt hard work off him.
And the Deloitte bit, that was at what age?
So I was awarded that at 17 and then went there when I was 18 for a year. And basically they take these completely uneducated, successful applicants, throw them out to their clients, charge them out as graduates, and you get thrown into these situations that you're not prepared for. But you learn a lot. And then the aim is they bring you back every holiday in order to do more work in their different departments. And then they have a belief that most of those people would end up joining as grads, and many of them did.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed the experience. I loved working with them, but you just get thrown into these crazy situations. My first role I can remember was in Oxford Circus, in the middle of London. I'd been there maybe
Good old
2 weeks,
Oxford Circus, eh?
right in the centre, busiest place in the UK. And my first role was interviewing the CFO of a software company about his depreciation schedule and fixed asset register. And I didn't know what either of those two terms meant, but I had 15 questions on a piece of paper. I had to go in there alone, meet him, and come out with answers to all of them. And that just encourages you to step out, encourages you to take a risk, encourages you to kind of learn very quickly etiquette. And so that was the kind of experiences we had all through that first year.
And so I get you got a lot of experience and you learned a lot from that experience at Deloitte. But what was it that convinced you that that wasn't for you?
I can remember staying in the office one night until maybe 10 o'clock at night because the senior partner needed someone to stay there to taxi a contract to a big client, get it signed, and then taxi it back. And that's great. That's fine. I'm more than happy to do that. That was part of my role. But I could see that what Deloitte are very, very good at is the machinery, the methodology behind what they deliver. And so there's a very structured path you walk through from new entrant all the way through if you make it to being a partner.
Yeah.
And I guess I just wanted a bit more freedom than that would allow and a bit more independence than that would allow.
And your first business was?
So in the first year of university, our thesis was, let's start in the most difficult industry we can think about, because then everything else will be easy.
Interesting.
So we set up a top-end women's wear fashion label.
Top-end women's fashion label?
Yeah.
Okay. and so what were you doing? Were you on the business side? Were you involved in the creation of the...
Neither of us had a clue about fashion.
Okay.
And so we walked into our lecture hall one day, looked around the room and just thought, well, she looks like she's dressed well, and went and introduced ourselves and asked her to come and join us.
Wow. Okay. I mean, I've heard of starting businesses like that. Like that guy seems to know his thing, so bring him on. So what was the business called? So
the business was called Eloquio, which, a kind of faux Italian name that we made up. And the thesis was basically crowdsourced fashion before that was a thing, before crowdsourcing was a thing. So this is back in 2003, probably. And so what we did was went to Birmingham Institute of Art and Design, Central, St Martin's, all the different main fashion colleges in the UK, contacted the students on message boards and emails and through their main college directories and said, we're a new fashion label in the UK. If you submit designs to meet our brief, then we will choose the best ones and we will pay for them to be sampled and sold, and you'll get a royalty based on anything we sell to retailers and wholesalers.
Interesting.
So that was the model.
So you were doing that, what year was this when
it must have been 2003. Yeah, 2003, 2004.
Because I feel that's been quite successful.
It's a very good model.
Yeah.
It's a very good model. It was a very good model. But we ended up in court in our second year of university.
Oh, why? What happened? If you can share, of course.
Of course, yeah, no. It's all funny now. Well, just to backtrack a bit, we got this first brief that people submitted. I think we had 75,
how many
75 designers.
What?
We selected maybe 15 or 20. And then we found a factory in the UK. Actually, it was a manufacturing unit in Wales. And we went and bought all the materials and the different textiles and shipped them. And we got twirls made, which is the first part of the sampling process, and then samples made. And this was all kind of a few grand on a credit card or student loan, probably. And then we started selling. So this was now B2B selling into boutiques and wholesalers as well. And we found a retailer, a boutique down in the southwest of England that liked what we were doing and ended up buying the entire collection. So several items of everything, which was wonderful. We actually found the invoice last week.
Made profit off
well,
that?
This was maybe as two kids who'd done nothing apart from contact some students and import some textiles. This was a £10,000 or £15,000 order from a small boutique.
I think I'm kind of trying. I'm starting to see where the lawsuit came. Was it from the people that designed the
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. No. It was from those who bought them.
Really?
So everyone else was happy. So we manufactured the collection, we delivered it, and that boutique we'd only made one sale, so one big sale, and that would have paid for everything for our first season. That was fine. We maybe would have got some online orders as well, but that was the main thing we were focused on. But in the period between them signing that order and paying us a third deposit and us delivering on the order, the boutique faced financial problems and ended up going out of business. So they tried to not pay us by claiming wrongful sizing. So when the clothes were delivered, they basically said that these weren't the sizes we ordered. Now, my wife certainly knows that sizes are not a standard. You can't walk into a shop and get the same size in every shop. So there's no kind of regulation over that. Well, there certainly wasn't then. And we'd done our very best to make sure it was exactly what we should have delivered. But that was how they claimed they shouldn't be paying us. And so we had to take them to they took us to small claims court to get the money back that they owed us. And then we had to counterclaim them. And I remember driving down from university. As I said, my dad is very conscientious, very diligent, always on the right side of the law. And he's an accountant, and saying to my dad, okay, we're driving down to Bodmin County Court now. And I can remember it was a misty day, it was horrible. This was now in my second year of university, I think, when it all unraveled, maybe third. And having to defend ourselves against a solicitor and, all of her kind of legal apparatus. And we ended up agreeing to, split the costs, and we got the money back to pay for everything. But it was a very early lesson that, even those first wins, there's probably some problems that are coming down the road.
And was that what put you off from continuing that model and this business?
Oh, it was that and a few other experiences. I think we learned, we were full of grit, but I think we learned that this was not an industry we knew anything about. So I can remember another time, our second season, second collection. While that was still all happening, we went ahead and did our next season. And we were both studying in the US, myself and my co-founder. We went on exchange. I was in Richmond in Virginia, and he was at Wharton in Pennsylvania. And so we had the samples shipped over to us. And the first time we saw them was when they landed in a FedEx box in his apartment.
Okay.
And so what we'd done is the next day we booked up appointments with all of the top-end boutiques across Manhattan. So this collection landed on our door. And I can remember just falling to my knees in his apartment saying, it's all crap. Like, it's not very good. And then we had to go the next day. We got the coach down to Manhattan and we went boutique to boutique, all of these top end. And I mean, some of them were polite, but you know, we certainly didn't win any sales at in the Manhattan boutiques. So there was a few experiences like that where it was too early for, you know, e-commerce wasn't really a thing there. People weren't buying online from indies. The route into different boutiques that we tried and wholesalers was hard. And fundamentally, there are many people who don't make it in that industry who have studied fashion, who have been in textiles for decades, who are extremely creative. And we had none of that. All we had was a nice website we'd designed and a bunch of students we'd asked to create designs for.
I heard that it is today a terrible industry to get into. It's so hard to get into the fashion industry and the retail fashion industry. Back then, was it the same thing, or did you felt like you had avenues that could have potentially, if the execution was right, could have made you basically a famous designer in UK?
There was no chance of me being a famous designer. I think the model was really strong. The best bit about that business was the digital kind of catalog and the digital site that we built, and the business model. Those two things were really good. And so we learned what we were good at. We learned we were good at research, good at that marketing proposition, and good at the model, the economic model that sat behind it. And we were rubbish at the rest of it. So we took those learnings onto 3 or 4 other attempted startups through the course of the rest of our university.
Right. And it was the pair of you that started, close down this, and then start another one? Or did you team up with someone else?
Same. Charles, his name is. Straight on to the next one. We weren't in any way perturbed. Literally the next day, let's start the next thing. Little black book of all of our ideas. And all of them faced distribution challenges. So there was some element of a proposition we were building. And we got some customers. But the one that ended up being the business I had at when I graduated that meant I could say no to Deloitte was actually a web design, social media app development company. And so it was an agency. And we started off by walking to local schools and architects and selling them websites and then building them. And I think some of them are still alive to this day.
As in your design and your development?
In Dreamweaver, you know.
What? I mean, why? That shouldn't surprise. I've seen so many things in my life that's not surprising.
Exactly. Some local primary school in the Midlands or something. And so we did that, just going out and pitching and, you know, buying databases and contacting people. And so we did that side of it. And then we ended up selling to bigger companies where they had regulatory kind of investor news they had to change on their website, and they didn't have a CMS they could change. And so we went and did that for them. But then the breakthrough really was all of the different social app APIs that started becoming available. So we built the first Facebook app for number 10 Downing Street. We built a whole betting portal for Sky. We built a really interesting Twitter visualization tool for ITV. So whenever you watched a football match, the ITV website would show, based on visualizing sentiment, you know, who was winning and who was losing. And we built a bunch of these kind of social media aggregator and analysis tools using sentiment analysis. And that was where we had a specialism. And so by the time we graduated, that was a business we had running. And it was, for me, a step into my next business. And for my co-founder, it was the business he then ran for the next few years.
I remember the good old days of Facebook apps. I dabbled with that as well. I think it was one of the first music players and YouTube music players that I built on Facebook, and where you could pick the URLs from Facebook, from YouTube, and make a playlist of music, and that didn't last too long.
Well, we'll come back to music in a minute, because one of them ended up in music.
So you said the stepping stone to your next bit, which was without your university buddy?
Yeah, so in my third year, just as we graduated, I met Ed, who was then my co-founder for IDEO, that we'll talk a bit about, which was the startup we raised money for and ended up exiting. I met Ed in my third year. He was in his second year, and I loved that he had a real strong product vision for something that could be built and scaled rather than the agency we had built, which is difficult to scale. And so I said to my co-founder, okay, I think this is what I want to be doing. Are you happy to carry on running the agency if I go and try and do this? And so we made an agreement that he would carry on running this and he'd be the CEO of this. And I went and left him to go and join Ed. And
were you still a shareholder of
shareholder and a director,
right?
Of the
But
agency, not
non-exec,
right? Yeah, not very involved. And we went and launched IDEO Mag, which was a music magazine. So we'll come to that in a minute. Was our first product. And what was really interesting is he was, everyone I work with is way smarter than me. Like one of my career goals is to be the dumbest person in the room. And so
that's the best strategy ever.
100%.
Mine as well.
There we go. Well, we can battle it out today to be the dumbest person in the room.
Yeah.
I think I'm winning.
Well, I don't know about that. I've been failing for 13 years. You at least had exits along. Like I had my exit half a year ago. So.
No, it's all good. So we basically, he learned to code in a week when our CTO quit to go and join Google. And then we launched this product, which was a personalized music magazine, which was basically using some very intelligent algorithms to personalize music content for your taste.
So it was a digital magazine?
Digital magazine. So think Flipboard before Twitter was a data set. So pre-Twitter. So what you could do is go to Pandora or iMeme or iLike or any of these Last.fm, any of the very early music communities, and bring your username and add it into our landing page. And very early examples of data portability before that was had any structure around it. And we use that username to go and scrape your music taste on any of those public sites, and then instantly personalize a web magazine for you based on content that we'd licensed from Rolling Stone and Billboard and loads of niche music blogs.
I was about to say copyright is a big thing, but you've had licensed stuff.
So we agreed licenses
big.
with all these blogs. So maybe 250 different sources we'd licensed. And then we remixed this magazine on the fly based on your taste. And then every time you chose to read or not read something, we'd then update your profile. And we learned a bunch of things through that process. We learned that people don't want to tweak their profile. They just want to be observed and then get personalized content. Because we tried giving them a preference center where they could say what they liked. I like shoegazing punk and I like, skate rock. And no one wanted to go and tweak that. They just wanted to import their music taste and then let it learn. So we learned that. We also learned about the cold start problem of personalization, where you need to bring preference from other places in order to start the engine working. But we also learned the power of personalization and how much people got from that experience. And that really, we can talk about what that led to, but we got some early ad revenue, bootstrapped the business, ended up paying for the first few staff members based on that ad revenue. Maybe had 100,000 readers or something at its peak, but couldn't get escape velocity.
Question. So your revenue model was advertising.
Yep.
Why did you go for advertising versus a subscription? And what year was this?
So again, this was super early. This might have been 2010. So
okay.
there wasn't really, SaaS
Subscription
wasn't. Yeah, SaaS wasn't really there. Distribution was key for us. We just wanted people to use it.
Yeah.
Freemium wasn't really a recognized model back then. Certainly not, we didn't know about it. And also, as we were launching, there were a bunch of agencies in London doing very creative and high-cost video advertising and interactive advertising. And our magazine was a Flash magazine.
Oh, yeah.
And so because it was in Flash...
Use Flash.
Don't, I know.
Oh, my goodness.
Awful decision in hindsight. Awful decision.
I've used it so many times.
At the time, it meant that we could carry these very interactive video ads, which many others couldn't. And it just became a very good revenue model for us for that period of time.
So you built the advertising management system on top of it as well, that allowed these advertisers to come in and bid and do stuff.
They could come and they could do very, very tight targeting on very individualized profiles, but none of them wanted to. They just wanted eyeballs. So they wanted to be somewhere cool with as many eyeballs as possible. So actually no one used all of our personalized targeting. They just bought run of magazine ads.
I feel that that's the tendency of a lot of, at least when you're at the startup stage, a lot of founders, when they get into advertising, you know, when you go and you put that slider and you start increasing the slider of age and demographics and this and that, and you're like, FOMO, or I don't want to lose on these people. No, I think these people could be a fit as well. I think that's the regular behavior of early startups, at least.
Totally. And we also just didn't have a big enough audience for you to be able to target, because you'd have been targeting 2 people. And so the economics just didn't really work. And really, the economics of the whole business didn't work, because we were building on 2 things: the music record industry and the publishing industry that was dying, and an advertising industry that was also facing severe threat at that point. So actually 3, you know, music records, publishing, and advertising. So that was never going to achieve breakout success. But we learned a lot about distribution. I can remember, do you remember Last FM? One of the early music communities?
Yeah.
We found a way to hack their internal message.
It's still
around.
Around.
We found a way to hack their internal message system to allow users who had brought their Last FM profile to our site to go and auto-message their friends to invite them. And we remember...
so illegal, I love it.
I'm sure it's not illegal. I remember getting a message from the chairman of Last FM, who at that time was very influential in the SaaS space in Europe, saying, "Stop it, we've just realized that most of our traffic in our internal chat systems is your messages." So we found some very good distribution mechanisms that worked, but learned a lot. Some of all of our learning was that this was not going to be a business that could scale, but we had a really interesting recommendation engine that sat at the heart. And so we basically took the next 2 years, and again, this is my co-founder, all of his smarts, to rebuild that as a SaaS, and then to offer that recommendation system to business content from a variety of different sectors.
But I feel I kind of miss those days. I feel that they're not that, there's not such a big occurrence anymore. Back in the days, we used to hack a lot more and then just think of innovative ways to hack growth. And, there's the saying, like, fake it until you make it. I say hack it until you make it.
Yeah.
Because I feel that that's what you were doing. That's what I was doing in the early days. It's not that common anymore. I feel that we have access to so much information, and everything is so templatized, and we have so many available services. In a sense, it's beautiful because it gives you access to all of these things that you can put components together. But I feel that 10, 20 years ago, we were a lot more of a hacker group, in a sense.
We also have much more significant platform maturity now than we used to.
Yeah.
Most recent marketing platforms, what has there been? Maybe TikTok in terms of new channels to consumers, but they're built in such a way that they've learned off the maturity of other platforms.
And it was so fast. Like TikTok came like that, and it's now an established thing. Yeah. Where back in the days, if you look at Vine and others, they the hiccups that they had, and then they failed. But they grew really, really fast. And when TikTok came along, I was thinking that they're going to have the same fate, but then you realize, no, but they're building on top of solid base. Idio, was that with E?
So it was Idio with an I, so I-D-I-O. So initially it was Idiomag, so from the root Latin personalized, idiosyncratic, etc. Right. So that was the name, Idio. And then we shortened it to Idio, I-D-I-O, and lost the mag once we made it into a SaaS business.
Right, okay. Because my initial thinking is knowing what you're aiming for, I might be pronouncing it IDEO, because it's I, me, and audio.
Lots of people did. I don't know why we didn't. The other thing we didn't realize is that you add a T on the end and it makes idiot. But,
Yeah, well, at least you didn't have it in the domain. Right. So you figured out that wasn't working. Look, there's so much I can relate to your journey, so much from the early days when you started, because I started very early working and then trying to build a business, and to the days where you were doing something, putting things together, hacking things that you thought would work, but in reality they were dying industries.
Yeah.
I've been there, done the exact same thing. What kept you going after that going under, right? What kept you going? So with EDO, you sunk that or did you sell it?
So we bootstrapped all the way to rebuilding it as a SaaS platform. We then won some massive early deals with Diageo, who own Guinness, and Unilever, big CPG companies, who were
so
looking.
The industries weren't that dead if you got
no. So
these.
now we were selling to people who had money,
Yeah.
and they had massive consumers, loads of content, and so content personalization now was really interesting. So on Guinness.com, we were running all the content personalization through our engine. So if you were interested in rugby, and we knew where you were living, and we knew maybe your favorite rugby team and your favorite football team, we would personalize Guinness content on Guinness.com and in their newsletters for you. So it's really interesting work. Diageo, for Unilever, we did the same. For Slim Fast, which was one of their weight loss kind of products. So they had a big community and we would personalize the content. For them, it was maybe a bit of a gimmick, but it really worked and drove engagement. And our big problem was that we thought we'd found our ICP and we thought now we can scale. And so we went to raise money. And we raised money from Notion Capital, who are a great VC in Europe. I work with them to this day, but our raise was not how you should do it. We got one term sheet from one investor, said yes, and got on with it, which is, was great. They honored their terms. We had a great relationship with them. But it was the start of a fundraising journey that happened very frequently over the course of the next 6 or 7 years.
Really? Because I was going to ask, well, you raised once how much you raised, but you didn't raise once, you raised multiple times.
I think we must have raised, in terms of equity and debt, we must have raised maybe $13 million over the course of the next few years.
Wow.
And we were a solution in search of a problem for the entire period until we got things right and then could grow in an exit. So we had this really cool product that everyone was very impressed with, and we just didn't know which market, which fit to sell it to.
What were you solving, basically?
Yeah, what were we solving? Yeah, absolutely. So we tried selling to trade publishers for all of their trade content. We tried selling to financial services, to enterprise tech, to other media companies, all these different companies. And every quarter would have enough good news for people to want to keep us alive. And so we raised from Notion and we raised from a bunch of high net worths, angels and an angel syndicate. And we ended up raising from a small PE fund as well. And then there was a mix of debt in there as well. And there was just always just enough good news to not kill it. But it was a very painful journey.
But that feels like that was your full-time job to raise money. Did you have time for anything else in between?
We did, because it was over a period of time. So, I was always on the market-facing side of the business, so always in the marketing and sales side, and then kind of de facto became CMO as we started growing. And we were probably 12 people when we raised money, and we were 60 at the point of exit. But that was a bumbling journey, and we had so many crises along that way. Because when you're experimenting with markets, you see big churn. Because one company buys you, and then another company buys you, and then you suddenly realize one of them churns, and that market wasn't right. You have to find another market. So, but there was enough good news along that journey for our backers to stay with us and to keep investing and keep seeing around the corner. And eventually, it got to the point where we could see that our cap table was so messy that the only way of us with a clean conscience chasing for a much bigger opportunity, which we believed was there in the market, and to remove a bunch of misaligned shareholders around the table, was to either recap the business, to do a bunch of secondaries, or to have some kind of exit. And so we agreed with the board that's what we wanted to do. And fortunately, by that point, we'd now found our ICP. And so we'd signed Salesforce, IBM, Intel, SAP, massive enterprise tech, B2B tech. We signed the who's who in the zoo.
What was it, by the way?
What was?
Your ICP.
So the ICP was very large enterprise hardware and software in the US who used us in their marketing operations function in order to personalize content for their business customers and to learn a data profile that they could store back into their marketing automation system.
Right.
So little examples, if Intel have 18 separate nurture tracks for different types of customer, and we were switching you to the right nurture track based on your tastes, based on what you were reading on Intel.com. Or IBM, when you went to IBM's homepage, or Salesforce, Trailblazer content, that all used to be powered by our personalization.
Right.
And so that's what we end up finding our ICP. The choice of finding that ICP was interesting, though, because we had to basically take ourselves on an offsite as a leadership team, recognize that we were way too broad, and then we betted the house on one type of customer. At that point, we had 15 types of customers, sectors, and KPIs they were using us for.
Yeah.
And we said no to all of these, said yes to this, and at that point, we had one customer in that profile. But we knew it was the right, in our guts, we knew it was the right profile. And that led to all of this, modicum of success of being able to repeatedly win business, and then we were able to sell the business off the back of that.
Was there any internal friction when you took that decision? Because that seems like a massive decision. If you build a team of 30, 40, 60 people, that you have teams, group of people, functions that focus on a variety of areas and different customers and so on. How was that journey after you as leadership decided bet on this? How was spreading the news and regrouping, restructuring internally or did you had already things in place that everyone switched?
No, we lost some of the leadership team as a result of it. Not just the team, the leadership team. Because there would be people there who had joined particularly to sell into that segment or had a strong belief about something different. And so no, it was, we lost customers, we lost team members, but we had found a sector that had a very high willingness to pay. So the sector we chose was actually the hardest. We had the lowest win rates in that sector. It was the hardest to break into. And our product wasn't yet fit for purpose there. But it had the highest willingness to pay.
Brave group, brave bunch you guys were to do that.
We just had to roll the dice again. We had to roll the dice again. And it worked that time. And maybe it's survivor bias, but I strongly believe in the power of finding a very small market focus in order to understand.
Yeah. And good execution and a bit of luck, of course. So then after that period, after you found the fit, when did you sell?
So about 18 months later, we'd now signed a bunch of these deals with larger enterprise tech companies, but we came to this decision where we now needed to sell the business or do some kind of recap of our shareholding. There is that saying that companies are bought, not sold. Well, our company was very much sold. There wasn't some strategic buyer desperate to pay a massive premium. We needed to sell it. But
that is perfectly okay in a sense. Like, I feel that there's this stigma, like you say, oh, you have to be bought. If your company is, if you sell it instead of having it bought, then you fail. I completely disagree. Like, Nikki and I decided in 2021 that our destiny is to get acquired and be part of a bigger team. And we carved our path, and a lot of our actions were focused towards that exit. And did that mean that we had to make ourselves worth? Yes. And in the same time, no. I feel like there's a truth somewhere in between us being this super appealing company to acquire and also us making ourselves acting like this company. So the truth is somewhere in between. When you're pushing towards this, it's impossible you not to make yourself sellable in a sense. So, but that's perfectly okay. We all want a variety of things in life, and we put together a group of people that want certain things. So, me preaching here on Misfit Founders is also to tell people that it's completely okay for you to build a business with the purpose of selling it, if that's what you're aiming for.
Yeah, 100%. And we were tired. We believed we could take this to the next level if we had a group of shareholders around us who would back us. But we had now different pools of shareholders who wanted different things at different levels of exit. And we could no longer keep trying to keep them all together whilst doing the day job. And so we said, look, this is it. We now need to run a process. And fortunately, we had a very good chairman, independent chairman called David Eldridge, who was instrumental to that process. He was very connected in the city, and we ran a dual track sale process. So we actually set up a cornerstone investor from the AIM to do an IPO on the alternative investment market in London. And so a small IPO was our option A. And then once that was all organized and had a time frame behind it, we then went and looked at trade buyers, and a trade buyer came forwards, and they were able to give us a valuation that was commensurate with what we needed in order to exit the business. And we had a broker running that whole process for us. They were very expensive, but it worked. And I was so grateful because we sold in November 2019, 2 months before COVID hit. And so it would have been very different if it happened.
My goodness, that is such a... Because when you said that, it hit me hard, because not only that we got seed investment 2 months before the pandemic hit, where our seed investor, our angel investor, said, if this would have been more advanced, like if it started earlier, we would have kept our money for a while. Not only that, but Nikki and I were working, my partner and I were working for a company in London, and the company got acquired by Accenture a month before the pandemic hit. I was their first employee. They sold at 160. I had share options in the company, so I managed to exercise. So when I hear that, I'm like, oh, that hits home really hard.
Yeah, and, as you say, a luck.
So I guess like one of my questions would have been whether the process was challenging and stressful for you personally. I do recognize having a mediator, having a corporate advisor, and so on, someone to deal with the acquisition takes a lot of that load, because we've had a corporate advisor that helped us with the acquisition and with the negotiation and stuff like that. But I want to understand a bit more about your experience. How was it?
It was really helpful. It was incredibly stressful, the whole process, and very tiring. But we could not have done that deal without our chairman and then without those advisors, without our broker. They were running both sides of the dual track. So they're running the small cap IPO as well as the trade sale. And so they were able to defend valuation. And they were able to play the sides off against each other in the right way. And for our size of exit, we're talking multiple tens of millions, but not billions. You need to choose advisors very carefully. Because most times advisors want to go towards the commissions they can get off the very large deals. And they aren't motivated in the smaller deals, the sub-$100 million deals. But we managed to find one because of the relationships we had on our board. They were motivated to work with us through that. And because it had two strands, they knew there was a high likelihood of exit. And so they were absolutely exceptional, and I'd work with them again. But it was a very stressful 6 months.
I keep on telling people the hardest period in my entire professional life was my exit. Like I've not been through anything more stressful than our exit. And we were in a really good position with getting acquired by friends of ours. And it was still bloody hard. And we had a corporate advisor and everything. But I think it was a mix of things that caused the stress, including the fact that we got into the LOI in July last year, and very soon after, it was that period, if you remember, where all of these big SaaS companies started reporting negative numbers, and we were thinking, "Holy crap, it's happening!" Because it was preempted from the beginning of the year. We think, "Oh, it's happening. It's the tech crumble. This whole deal will backfire or will be canceled." And luckily that didn't happen, which was But it was a very stressful period.
I can remember where I was. I was at a conference in Miami, and we were days away from the final signature. And I was actually meeting with the company that were buying us. I was at their conference. It's the first time I'd met many of them face to face. So we were bought by Insight Venture Partners, big private equity fund in New York, but we were bought by one of their portfolio companies.
Yeah.
One of their largest wholly owned assets, called Episerver, big .NET CMS that we can talk about that journey in a minute. And I can remember being there, and I was about to go and meet the partner, the senior person from Insight Venture Partners who was buying us. And I got a call from Ed to let me know that our largest customer had churned. So 7% of our revenue churned, and we're 5 days away from final signing.
Let me ask you this very important question. Did you already send them all of the churn retention numbers?
They had full access to our numbers.
But were they at a stage where they would check again before signing off?
100%. This was fully disclosable, and it was a written letter that we didn't know it was coming. The company changed strategy, and mid-process, 5 days before we signed, sent us a letter. And this was I can't remember, maybe a $700,000, maybe more than that deal. It was a big deal, and it was meant to be rising the next year. So this was a big chunk of change that suddenly had gone. And this was where the brokers were very good, because they were the ones able to manage that conversation and say, look, no one expected this. Mm-hmm. The business is still just as healthy. The business has still got the same future. And if you want it, you need to pay almost the same valuation.
So that was like you said, almost 7% of your business. Did you had any other large whales like that in the portfolio?
A few others, but it was
because I feel like if that's the case, it can get daunting and concerning by the acquirer, because it's like, oh, they just lost 7%. They have 5 more 7% customers. Yep. Are those going to churn? And then it winds up to being 15% of the revenue that they had in the past.
Yeah, all of those questions were asked.
But that's like, in the future, if I do an exit, I need your corporate advisors, to be honest, because that's a lifesaver. That's a miracle worker right there.
It was also the strength of having the small cap IPO ready to go. We had another very credible offer. We had the markets ready to back us.
Yeah.
And so this was, if you want us to come away from this public route, if you want us to be diverted in our strategy, then you're going to have to still pay what you said you're going to pay.
Yeah, that is very important. Because acquisitions with sellers, if you have leverage as a seller, that's important. Because if you don't, then you're at the mercy of whatever happens. And to be honest, I think acquiring companies, you can have as big of a personality in the team, founder, and so on, and want nothing but the best for the company that comes in. At the end of the day, it's a working business with people put in place to optimize as much as possible of these deals. It's just another transaction for people that are hired to make sure that you don't bleed money with these deals. So I understand it in a way. But on the other side is, if you're a small fish, and this is why some people don't like me recommending this, but every single time I talk to a small founder that wants to sell here or do this, I'm like, at least get a corporate lawyer to help you with reading this. If you can afford it, and if you want to invest in that part of your transaction, get a corporate advisor as well to do the negotiation deal for you, because it might be a lifesaver in a sense.
One of the real strengths of using a third party there is that if you're being acquired and you're meant to be staying on with that business, is these are the people you're going to be working with.
Yes, exactly.
And so to remove the friction out of that relationship, all of you can blame a third party, and that's their job. And so we were able then to work really well with the team that acquired us over the next couple of years, partly because we had a third party in that room helping to juggle those difficult conversations.
Yeah, that is very important, vocalized, because I feel like when you think of the buyer and seller interests and, what a buyer wants and dislikes about a corporate advisor, what a seller likes about that and cares about. But in the same time, it's for both of yours good, because if you're bringing someone in, we're talking about acquisition, not selling and going into the sunset in a sense. Acquisition, you want a performing and a motivated team to be part of. I'm curious, is it public what you sold for, or is it private?
Yeah, we never disclosed that.
Okay.
Yeah, but made sure the team all got a reward for their work.
Right. And your investors all had happy
all got a return.
Returns and stuff. That's
good relationships with them.
That's good.
So it wasn't one of the tech crunch, 100x exits, but it was good enough to establish both of ourselves in our next phase. It wasn't enough to retire to Rio for the rest of our lives, but it was enough to buy a family home and make sure the kids are supported and have some money for some investments, etc.
But that's important, and for me and Nikki it has been, because we're renters, living minimum means in a sense, and we've always had this picture of we want our nice house with our 2 little dogs and be able to afford certain things. And that's perfectly okay. I feel that, again, this is another stigma where it's like, well, it shouldn't be about material stuff. It shouldn't be about this. It should be about having a bigger impact or this or that. Yeah, I agree. But I also care about my family being okay. And there are other people that don't have that attraction towards this vision of a bigger impact in a sense, and they just want to be okay financially and so on. And I think that's perfectly fine. Now, was that the moment where you switched from owning your own business to working for someone? Tell me a bit about that transition.
Yeah. So I went from being a co-founder of a software company to suddenly running global marketing for a software company. We were the first of a roll-up. So we were the first acquisition, and then we went and bought another 4 or 5 businesses over the next 2 years. And so my co-founder ended up running product strategy, and I ended up running marketing strategy. And so I joined the marketing team of the acquirer, and then we bought 4 other businesses. Optimizely was the biggest acquisition we made, so a large US business. And we went from 400 people to 1,500 people in 2 years, mostly by acquisition. And so suddenly, complexity. Suddenly it's dealing with teams of teams. It's dealing with budgets. It's dealing with all of that stuff. And so, that was a big switch for me, and a much bigger environment and a different day job. But I was there for almost 2 years, and I enjoyed it. I learned a huge amount there. And you asked at the beginning whether I still considered myself a founder. Well, I made a decision to either stay there until IPO or to go and start a new business and to go back and found another business. And I'd been doing a few small seed investments. I really love the early stage. And so I was made this decision. It's going to be one of these 2 things, IPO where I am or co-found again. And I was doing some advisory work with a few different companies, and Paddle was one of those advisory clients. And so suddenly, after making this decision, it would be one or the other, Paddle came along with an offer that was so interesting because I could use many of my entrepreneurial strengths, but also be part of a team that was scaling a business that had already gone through the really difficult early years. And so, that was the point at which I jumped aboard Paddle.
And are you in Paddle, are you currently an intrapreneur? Do you consider yourself an intrapreneur?
So,
I mean, you are part of the leadership team there, but are you able to exercise your entrepreneurship muscles inside there and start initiatives and do bits?
100%. And if I wasn't, then I wouldn't be there. So it's a business that's got loads of ambition, and I feel really supported by the leadership team to try stuff. And so we're launching, accelerators. We're launching different crazy, marketing programs. I really care about the economic model, our flywheel of growth. The different products we have and how our different products help SaaS founders scale more effectively. I love our market. Our market is SaaS founders. And so, yeah, I feel I'm much more of a founder entrepreneur than I am an exec. And Paddle gives me the ability to do both of those. And I get to do it with a great team as well.
Yeah, honestly, I'm jealous because I've always said I've been a founder for so long. I've always wanted to work or have a business that tailors to founders, to SaaS founders. I love Stripe.
Yep.
Oh, I love Stripe.
Yep.
Stripe is like such. I was every single time I see Stripe, I'm like, God damn it! I could have built that. That could have been my business. It feels like such a perfect dedication towards founders, startups, and so on. And I love Paddle as well. Profitwell. I used Profitwell for so long, and these are the type of businesses that, because I'm so passionate about entrepreneurship, the entrepreneurship journey, founders. That's why I'm doing Misfit Founders Initiative as well. I feel that that's such a fit in a sense. And I know a lot of people that have been through the ringer with a couple of startups and businesses, sold a couple of times, so serial exits, and then because they gain so much knowledge about this world, they started a business to help founders in a way or the other.
Yeah, and I still do a bunch of that kind of advisory work. It has to be in very limited time periods. But the other thing that's really interesting about Paddle is that our economic model is taking a few percentage points of the ARR of the businesses we serve. It's a payments model. And so what that does is align our success with their success. So anything that we can do to help software founders grow faster, grow safer, grow better, returns to our bottom line. So we have a thesis that we just want SaaS to grow better. And so that allows me to spend a bunch of my days just helping SaaS founders, helping leadership teams, thinking about multi-product, thinking about market entry, thinking about their growth strategies. And that's just part of my day job. And it doesn't have to be linked to a license fee we're charging anyone. Because if our customers grow faster, then we win as well.
That feels such a win-win setup, which is you don't get paid, we don't get paid. I've always really, I don't know why that resonated with me so for such a long time. And I don't know why more businesses don't use that approach. I've seen a couple of, if you reach this amount in ARR, then we charge you this percentage of your ARR. If you don't, we don't get paid because we want to support you to get there. So rather than having a cut now and decreasing then this. But this model of, you don't get paid, we don't get paid is, I don't know, it's brilliant, and I think more companies should use it. I mean, in a sense, the freemium, you could say that it's a bit that, because, we don't charge until you get this size, this many users, this and so on. And then you have your standard and your premium and your enterprises and so on. You can say that that's a tiny bit of that, but putting a percentage number, I think, is a great idea. It can also be the opposite. There's also some predatory behavior with some SaaS businesses which charge way too big of a percentage of one's business for very limited value. But if used wisely, I think this is the right way to go, amongst others. It depends on the business, right? Because it's not for every single business model.
It's all about finding your value metric. So our Price Intelligently team do a whole bunch of work with SaaS companies, helping them define their pricing and packaging. And so your value metric is the unit of exchange. Is it per seat? Is it per gigawatt? Is it per KPI achieved? Is it per revenue, the unit of revenue? And so everyone has to decide their value metric. And the ideal value metric is one where when you deliver more value, you're able to charge more money. And so if you're charging a percentage of ARR, but your value decreases over time and you're still charging linearly, then that's a problem too. And so you have to be very careful of your value metric. And so at Paddle, we had a thesis in the business for a long time that companies would get too big, the percentage would be too much in hard terms, and then they'd leave. And the beauty of what it is we keep adding more value into the platform, and the complexity of a company as they grow becomes more. And so we found that the value is the same as they scale. But you have to be very careful over that when you're defining your pricing.
Yeah, I suppose you guys also have a lot of experience with that, and now bringing profit well in as well. I feel that this is the elite team to figure out pricing in a sense. Like you literally have a show about pricing.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you a bit about your role. So you're today head of marketing of a company that's worth, is it already 2 billion? I know that it was 1.4 billion. Paddle was 1.4 billion in last year in summer.
That was the last valuation we disclosed.
Let's say close to 2 billion valuation, or somewhere around there. It's a big undertaking. One, is this the biggest role that you played in your career so far, working for a company? And second question, what keeps you at night in your role?
So on the biggest role, I guess in some terms, but not in others. So my former role at Optimizely, I had more budget. I probably had more team. It was a larger company, but I was one step down from the CMO. I was running corporate marketing, so I was running brand, demand, and digital. So a whole portion of marketing, but not the whole thing. Honestly, running a startup where you're severally responsible for every single thing that happens, that feels much more like a biggest job than what I'm doing now. And I've got team members to support and team members to help. So, I guess in some terms, maybe, in other terms, no. I do think that what we're doing at Paddle, being the fundamental payments infrastructure for thousands of people who depend on us for their livelihood, that feels big. And both of my previous roles were MarTech, marketing technology. If you died, then maybe someone didn't get an email or the website wasn't personalized. But it wasn't a matter of life or death for people. It wasn't their livelihoods, whereas now we are. So we recognize that we have a stewardship role. So about $1 billion a year goes through our platform to software companies. So it's a lot to steward. And there's a whole bunch of complexity behind how we do that well and how we make sure we're robust for our customers to trust us. So from that perspective, yes, we're a steward of thousands of customers. We need to make sure we do that well. So in that case, yes, it is. And what keeps me up at night? Well, honestly, I think the market's not great right now. We'll be hearing a bunch of that through SaaStock and through these other conferences.
Oh, yes.
Growth is down. We see that in our data. People are still growing on average, but the growth rates are down significantly. That's because less people are buying, but also because people have much less capital to devote to sales and marketing. So both sides of that sales equation have less funding.
Oh, yeah. It's a snowball effect when it starts, to be honest.
Yeah. And so we see that in our data. We see it come through very quickly. And so that makes a few things harder. Firstly, it means that our customers grow less fast than they have in the past, which means that our predictions over how fast they'd grow, we now need to adjust. And it means that we don't have much certainty about the future. The other thing that's very interesting about our economic model is it's very difficult to predict. We're not like a SaaS firm with loads of licenses that we can count on unless they churn.
Yeah.
If you're one of our customers and you take a 50% haircut in your revenue tomorrow, it hits our bottom line immediately.
Exactly.
And so forecasting is really difficult.
It is a lot more. You see, I didn't even think about that. Your pricing model means that you are a lot more real-time growth or decrease in your revenue. Because whereas if you charge per user, for example, it takes a period of time for a company when they're hit financially to downsize, whether employees, whether software that they use, and so on. So you're instant that happens. If a company starts dropping in revenue and performance, you instantly drop. So you have even a bigger stake and interest in making everything possible to help that company grow and perform.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see that in our data. So when market shocks happen, whether it is the capital evacuation that happened as interest rates started to rise, or whether it's the Ukraine-Russia war, we see firstly consumer software have churn fastest, because often that's the easiest, quickest thing to churn, low price point, low commitment. And then we start to see them move into the bottom end of B2B, kind of the prosumer end, and then into mid-market B2B. And so we see that come through. So you're right, kind of with very low commitment and immediacy, we're at the beginning, but we see that go through our base. And so, yeah, it's very important to then know what that means for our business, know what our tolerance levels are, and as you say, make sure that we're getting close to our customers so that we can help them grow through those problems, help them think through what their strategy is in order to bounce back fast. The positive thing is, as those tailwinds come back again, Paddle is very well positioned to continue growing. And even in this time, we have an NRR that's very, very strong. So it's a very resilient business model, but it just makes it very hard to plan.
The thing is, yes, I do feel, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think you also have a bigger understanding. I'm saying correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that this is a statement. You have a lot better of an insight to whether a company, a customer, is at risk of churning than anyone else, because you're relying that based on economical data versus behavioral and user engagement data. In a sense, you're seeing that happen. If they significantly start dropping in revenue, there's a risk not only that you're instantly dropping in revenue, but there's a risk they might churn because they might be doing downsides and cuts and so on. But that also means that it helps you estimate better, in a sense, right? Because if we're thinking of trends and not events that happen instant and so on, when we think of trends, you can see how that company is growing, so you'll be able to predict how much revenue you're making out of that company a lot better.
Yeah. So we cohort our customers into all different types of groupings to try and predict where they're going to go. And we still get it wrong most of the time, but we have to try and make sure we're understanding the different complexities in our base. Some grow fast, some grow slow. AI is an example, very fast growing. And so the portion of companies in our base that are AI, in terms of AI as a core part of their proposition that they monetize, growing lightning fast. But we also understand that often those businesses, particularly if they're kind of a consumer type price point, they have high churn if they're not able to lock in a very strong, sticky value proposition. So yeah, every segment has different characteristics.
It makes me a bit emotional and of happy seeing someone like yourself be so excited about their day job as they are, and speak so highly of their day job as they are of their entrepreneur path. And the reason why is because, and I was really hoping that you're going to have the same passion about Paddle versus your entrepreneurship journey, mainly because I do think that there's so much diversity out there when it comes to entrepreneurship and founder journey. And people sometimes, again, find it as a stigma going from being an entrepreneur to working a 9 to 5, to working a full-time job. And I feel that that's such a wrong narrative that we're being fed, that, and it's so different than 20 years ago where founders were the outcasts and you have to have a corporate stable path. And people were looking at founders at these, startup founders as this odd thing. Now it feels a bit reverse. If you're coming from a founder and entrepreneurship background, going into 9 to 5 automatically is considered as something went wrong. Where most of the time sometimes that's not the case. You're an example of that. You've went off a uni and tried and failed a bunch of businesses, built one that you sold, but even that went to its ups and downs. You managed to sell it. You managed to make everyone happy in that venture, and you're now excited about this industry and happily working with an awesome team. And again, that to me is emotional, because that means a lot, because I know people out there that watch this podcast that feel, because they have a group of a network and peer pressure, feel that they need to be an entrepreneur and a founder, but they're a lot more comfortable and efficient working with a team, working for a business.
Yeah. I think at university, I learned that the technical definition of an entrepreneur is someone who moves resources from one degree of yield to a higher degree of yield. And so, in mechanistic terms, that is what an entrepreneur does, whether that is buying wheat or buying oil or buying something else. And so, I love what I'm doing. I believe it is fulfilling on multiple levels. And absolutely, Confucius says, find a job you love and you'll never do a day's work in your life. Yes. And I feel very privileged that I work very hard, but I don't feel I'm doing a day's work in my life, because, don't tell Paddle this, I'd probably do this job for free.
Well, now it's captured on camera. I feel like a renegotiation of your salary comes soon. Right, so I do have the ending ceremony, which I'm asking you 3 questions, flash questions.
Hit me.
But before that, is there anything that you want to ask me? Do you have any curiosity about anything? Misfit founders, my journey as an exit founder, and I would say buddy, peer exited founder, or anything like that?
So one of the things I love about doing advisory work and with Paddle, working with customers, is pattern recognition. Okay. So you get pattern recognition from all the people you talk to, right? So I'm interested in what things you believe about Misfit founders have been true, and what things you found to be totally false as a result of that pattern recognition in speaking to all these different founders.
Yeah. Well, the number one thing that comes into my head is a lot of people that I talk to, that I eventually have on the podcast, tend to think that you have to have achieved a meaningful outcome in order to be able to speak on something like this. And everyone has a very specific definition of meaningful, which is, I made something that people know about. Like, I've had this grand thing. And I think that's one of the patterns that I'm seeing. Whereas what I'm trying to do with Misfit founders, the reason why it's called Misfit is because I'm giving a voice to a diverse group of individuals that have different backgrounds, are at different stages in their career, like yourself, right? So, when the opportunity came, I said yes instantly, because I know you have a past. And even if, let's say, this person has never a day in their life worked as a founder or had the title of a CEO, I would still 100% want to talk to them, because fundamentally there are people out there that want to start something. They, for what reason, one reason or the other, haven't started. They're more likely to relate to someone that's maybe one step ahead or at the same level than someone that has been ultra successful and so on. So this is one of the things that I'm trying to get people to open up. And this seems to be one of the most common things that I need to dig in, because I do talk to a lot of potential awesome guests that are quite refrained because they don't feel like they're worth being on the show, or they have anything valuable to add. And I know, you know, the quality of the content can be intimidating and so on, but I do want to continue to bring voices that you won't see anywhere else.
I love it.
Awesome. Right. So three quick questions.
Okay.
One, what is a tagline or a quote that you live by?
So I think Winston Churchill said, success is stumbling from one failure to the next with no loss of enthusiasm. And that's certainly something that has been a hallmark of my last 20 years.
Yeah, I can 100% relate to that one. Second question, what is a book that changed your life or impacted your life, be it your personal or professional life?
I remember reading Abundance by Diamandis and Kotler, which is a real interesting book. It's a techno-optimist's book. Basically is making the case that the media feeds us a very negative news cycle. And actually, on the whole, life is getting better. And the emerging technologies we're seeing mean that we've got the opportunity to continue that curve rather than everything being a negative news story and a negative outlook. And it makes a whole bunch of interesting cases around AI. This was written probably 10 years ago. And I remember reading that, but its techno-optimism was something that really resonated with me. Yeah,
me too. I haven't read the book, but the concept from how you describe it, 100%. I think we're so divided in two very well-defined groups, the techno-optimists and the techno-pessimists. And I've always been on this side. I think overall we're heading in the right direction, although there's half of the world that thinks that everything is going completely opposite. And then the last question is, what's one good habit that you advocate for?
So the founder journey is full of big highs and excruciating lows. So one habit I try and build in myself, and I've learnt by costly experience rather than by learned wisdom, is to remember that the most awful moments, they don't have to be overwhelming, and the most awesome moments, you can't get carried away. That you have to take the edge off both of those and realize that particularly in a startup and scale-up journey, there's this cognitive dissonance of good stuff and bad stuff happening at the same time.
Yeah.
And we just have to keep on walking. The awesome things aren't as awesome as they first sound. The awful things aren't as bad as they first sound. And our job is just to keep walking that path of the middle.
That's, that is powerful without sounding powerful. Because I feel like when you say that to people, they're like, yeah. But in reality, no one actually thinks about it. And it's good to highlight it. Well, thank you so much. Hold on. Stay there for a second. I have something for you. Okay. So I have something for you.
Okay.
This is a gift that I actually give every single guest. And you are number 11, guest number 11. And you get this custom-made coin with "I'm a misfit."
Oh, bless you. Thank you.
I think you think of yourself as a misfit, and on the other side you have the logo of the Misfit founders.
Very cool.
And it stands as also you can
very
put it
cool.
in somewhere.
That'll
that's from the Misfit founders.
Exactly.
Podcast.
That'll sit on the desk behind you. Much
Awesome.
appreciated.
Thank you so much. It was a lovely conversation, and I'm sure we're going to have to do more.